My name is Lena. I am 26 years old. I grew up in the slums, where people are very poor. Our homes were made of thin walls and old roofs. There were always loud sounds, dusty roads, and too many people in one room. Some days we had no water. Some nights we slept without food. But I learned how to live with little. I lived with my uncle and his wife. They had 3 children, and I helped take care of them. I cleaned, cooked, and stayed quiet. I often looked at the sky and wished for a better life. After school, I did not go to college. We had no money. I worked at a local diner. I cleaned tables, washed dishes, and served food. The pay was low, but I was happy. I liked talking to customers. Some of them came every day. They knew my name. They smiled when I brought them coffee. Life was not easy, but I was doing my best. One day, my uncle said I had to leave. He said his house was too full. I packed my bag, said nothing, and walked away. I had no home now. I slept on a friend's sofa for a few weeks, but I knew I could not stay there long. I needed a job. I needed a place of my own. So I took a bus to the city. It was loud and big. So many lights. So many people. I was scared, but I had no choice. In the city, I walked from street to street. I asked for work at shops and hotels. Some people said no. Some did not even look at me. Then, one evening, I saw a small hotel with a paper sign on the door. It said, "Cleaner needed. Night shift." I walked in and asked for the manager. A tall man came. His name was Mr. Harris. He looked serious. He asked me a few questions and said, "You can start tomorrow." I was happy. The job was not easy, but I was thankful. I worked from 10 at night to 6 in the morning. I cleaned floors, washed windows, and emptied trash. The hotel gave me a small room in the basement. It had 1 bed, 1 fan, and a table. It was not nice, but it was mine. I kept it clean. I was careful. I followed the rules. I never spoke unless someone spoke to me. Most nights were quiet. I worked alone. I listened to the soft sound of the city outside. I moved from room to room with my cart and my mop. The guests were already sleeping. I never went into rooms unless they were empty. I kept my head down. Mr. Harris told me to stay in my place. I did what I was told. But one night, everything changed. It was a cold night. I was cleaning the hallway on the first floor. Suddenly, I smelled something strange. It was like smoke. I stopped and looked around. The smell got stronger. I ran to the front desk. No one was there. I looked up the stairs and saw a thin line of smoke coming down. I dropped my mop and ran upstairs. I knocked on doors. I shouted, "Fire! Wake up! Get out!" Some people opened their doors. Their faces were full of fear. One woman was old and could not walk. Well, I held her hand and helped her down the stairs. I went back up to check more rooms. The smoke was thick now. My eyes burned. I could not breathe well. Soon the fire trucks came. The police came too. They told everyone to move back. The fire was big. It started in a room on the second floor. They worked for hours to stop it. In the end, one man did not survive. He was a guest in the hotel. They found him in his room. His door was closed. His windows were black with smoke. I sat on the curb outside the hotel. My hands were shaking. My uniform was dirty. My hair smelled like smoke. A police officer came to me. He asked me what I saw. I told him everything. I said I was cleaning the first floor. I said I smelled the smoke. I said I helped people get out. He wrote in his notebook. He looked at me for a long time. Then another officer came. They spoke in low voices. They asked more questions. I said the same things again. I was tired, but I answered. I did not lie. I had no reason to lie. The next morning, I returned to the hotel. Mr. Harris was standing at the front door. He looked angry. He said, "The police want to speak with you again." I was confused. Why? I asked. He didn't answer. He walked away. 2 officers came soon after. They took me back to the station. At the station, they asked me the same questions again. Then they showed me pictures. They said the fire started in a heater. They said my fingerprints were on it. I told them I cleaned that room earlier in the day. Of course my prints were there. They said no other staff was in the hotel. They said I was the only one who could have started it. I felt sick. No, I said. I helped people. I did not start the fire. But they did not believe me. They told me to sign a paper. I said I wanted a lawyer. They gave me a man who looked tired. He said nothing helpful. He just told me to stay calm. But I could not stay calm. A few weeks later, I stood in a courtroom. I wore clean clothes, but I felt dirty inside. I looked at the judge. I looked at the people in the room. No one knew me. No one believed me. Mr. Harris said bad things about me. He said I was not careful. He said I had a bad attitude. That was not true. I always followed the rules. But his words were louder than mine. The court said I was guilty. They said I started the fire. They said I killed a man. I cried. I tried to speak, but no one listened. I was sent to prison for 10 years. I was only 26. The prison was cold. The walls were gray. The lights were always on. The food was dry. The bed was hard. I had a small room with a toilet and a chair. The other women did not talk to me at first. I stayed quiet. I cried at night. I missed my old life. I missed my freedom. One day, I found a library inside the prison. It was small. The books were old. Some had missing pages. but I picked one up and started reading. Slowly, the words helped me. I started writing too. I wrote in a notebook every day. I wrote about the fire. I wrote about the hotel. I wrote about the truth. Writing helped me stay strong. I did not want to lose myself. I was not a criminal. I was not a liar. I was still Lena. I held on to that truth with all I had. Before I share the rest of my story, I need to know, where are you listening from? Knowing someone hears me, understands me, gives me strength. Days in prison were slow. The hours felt long. Sometimes I sat on the floor and looked at the wall. The same wall. The same noise. The same cold air. Every morning we woke up at 5. A guard opened the door. We stood in line for food. The food was always the same. Dry bread. Weak tea. Cold rice. I ate in silence. The other women in prison had different stories. Some were angry, some were quiet, some cried at night. After a few weeks, a woman named Kate spoke to me again. As she said, "You're always writing. What do you write about?" I looked at her and said, "I write my story. I don't want to forget who I am." She smiled. She didn't ask more. But after that, she sat next to me during meals. I kept writing. I wrote about my childhood, the slum, the hotel job, the fire. I wrote about the man who died and how I tried to help others. I wrote about Mr. Harris and how he lied. I wrote about how no one believed me. Writing made me feel human again. Each word was like a step forward, like I was still walking, still alive. One day, a new woman came to the library. She wore different clothes. She was not a prisoner. She had glasses and a kind smile. Her name was Emily. She said she was a teacher. She came to help women read and write better. She spoke softly. She asked if anyone wanted help with writing. I raised my hand. We started with small things, sentences, questions, new words. She corrected my writing, but in a gentle way. "Lena, your story is powerful," she said one day. "Do you want to share it?" I looked down. "No one will care," I said. She looked at me and said, "I care." Her words stayed with me all night. Someone cared. Someone saw me. Emily came every week. She brought books and paper. She brought hope. I gave her my notebook to read. She read every page. She cried at one part. Then she looked up and said, "This isn't just a story. This is a truth that people should hear." I wanted to believe her, but it was hard. So many people had turned away from me. One day, Emily brought a man with her. He was not a teacher. He was a lawyer. His name was David. He was younger than I expected. He sat with me and said, "Emily showed me your writing. I want to help." I looked at him. "Why?" I asked. "I have nothing." he said, "because I think you're telling the truth. And if you are, then this was a mistake. And mistakes must be fixed." I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I said, "I told the truth in court, and no one listened." He nodded. "I know. But sometimes it takes more time." He asked me many questions. He wrote down names, dates, details. He took my notebook. He said, "This is our first step." Weeks passed. I waited. I wrote more. I kept going to the library. Emily still came. She smiled at me more now. She gave me a new pen and said, "Don't stop writing." I didn't. It was the only thing that made me feel free. One morning, the guard called my name. "Lena, you have a visitor." I was surprised. Visitors were rare. I walked to the small room. David was there with a folder in his hand. He said, "I checked the fire report again. Something is wrong." He opened the folder. The photos from the crime scene show a broken lamp. But in your story, you said the lamp was not broken when you cleaned the room. I nodded. "Yes. I always check the lamps." He smiled. "That means someone else broke it. After you left." He showed me another paper. "Also, the fingerprints on the heater were mixed. Yours were there, yes. But someone else's too. They never tested that second set." I sat very still. "So, I wasn't the only one." He said, "No. And we're going to ask the court to look again." I felt my heart beat fast. I did not speak. I just looked at him. He said, "It won't be fast, but it's a start." David worked for months. He came to see me many times. He asked for papers from the court. He spoke to the fire team. He asked questions no one asked before. He even found one old guest from that night. The guest said he saw someone leave the hotel around the time of the fire. A man. Not a woman. Not me. David found out more. The man who died in the fire was not alone in the hotel that night. His brother had come to visit him earlier that evening. The brother had a history of drug use and money problems. He left the hotel before the fire, but no one had looked into him. David found his name in a visitor log. The police had missed it. David showed all of this to the court. He asked for a new trial. At first, the judge said no. But David did not give up. He wrote again. He brought more facts. He pushed harder. After almost 1 year, the court finally said yes. They agreed to look at the case again. I was called to the courtroom once more. I wore the same simple clothes. I felt nervous, but I stood tall. David spoke for me. He showed everything he found. He told the court that my trial was too fast, too weak, and full of mistakes. He said, "Lena did not get a fair chance, and now we have proof." The judge listened. The room was quiet. I looked around. I saw Emily in the back row. She smiled at me. Her eyes were soft. Then the judge spoke. "We have found new facts. Lena's case will be opened again. She will be released while we continue the review." I did not understand the words at first. Then I heard David say, "You're going home." I felt my knees shake. I sat down. I put my hands over my face. I could not stop the tears. The guard opened the door for me. For the first time in years, I stepped outside. I looked up at the sky. It was blue and wide. The air felt fresh. The sun was warm. I stood there for a moment. I did not have a bag. I had no phone, no money, just one small notebook in my hand. But I felt free. No one was waiting for me. No car, no family, no friend. But I did not feel empty. I started walking. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to keep moving. I walked to a small park and sat on a bench. I watched people pass by. I watched kids laugh. I heard music in the distance. I closed my eyes and breathed in. After so many nights in a cold cell, I felt warm again. That evening, I found a small church. The door was open. I went inside and sat in the last row. It was quiet. I closed my eyes and said 2 words in my heart. "Thank you." The next morning, I woke up early. I had slept on a bench in the church. My back hurt and my stomach was empty, but I felt calm. The city outside was loud again. Cars moved. People rushed. Life went on. I walked out of the church and into the street. I had no plan. I just started walking. I asked a man on the corner, "Is there a shop nearby?" He pointed with his hand and walked away. I followed the road and saw a small bakery. I looked inside. There was fresh bread on the shelves. My mouth felt dry. I stepped in and said, "Please, I have no money, but I'm hungry." The woman behind the counter looked at me. Her eyes were kind. She didn't ask questions. She gave me a small loaf of bread and a cup of tea. I sat down and ate. My hands shook. When I finished, I stood up and said, "Thank you. One day I will come back and pay you." She smiled and said, "You already did." By being kind. I left the shop with a soft heart. Her small act of care gave me hope. I walked for hours. I looked for places that might need help. Most people said no. Some didn't answer. Others looked at me like I didn't belong. I felt tired again. My shoes were old. My arms felt weak. But I did not stop. In the afternoon, I saw an old man cleaning a public park. He held a broom and moved slowly. I went near and said, "Do you need help?" He looked at me. His face was full of lines. He said, "You can sweep that side." He gave me a broom. I cleaned beside him for 3 hours. When we were done, he gave me a sandwich and a bottle of water. "You work hard," he said. "Come again tomorrow." And I did. Every day for the next few weeks, I came back. We cleaned together. He told small stories. Sometimes he laughed at his own jokes. I smiled too. I told him I had just come out of prison. I waited for him to walk away, but he didn't. He said, "We all carry something. I carry pain too." Then he patted my shoulder and said, "Don't stop." One morning, he saw me writing in my notebook during break. "What are you writing?" he asked. I said, "My story. It helps me stay calm." He said, "The world needs more truth. Maybe you should speak it." I didn't understand at first, but then he took me to a friend of his. She was a teacher at a small center. The center helped people learn how to speak in front of others. She listened to my voice, then said, "Come next week. Tell your story to a small group." I was scared. My hands felt cold, but I said yes. That week, I wrote everything again. I read it many times. I was afraid I would forget. When the day came, I stood in front of 12 people. They looked at me and waited. I started to speak. My voice shook, but I kept going. I told them about the hotel, the fire, the trial. I told them about prison, about the notebook, and the kind people who helped me. When I finished, no one spoke. Then one woman started to clap. Then another. Soon, all of them were clapping. A man stood up and said, "You gave me hope." That moment changed me. I walked home with light in my chest. I was still poor. I still had no house. But I had something stronger, a voice. The teacher invited me to speak again, at a library, then at a school, then at a small hall in another town. Every time I told my story, people cried. People hugged me. Some gave me food or a place to stay for the night. I never asked, but they offered. Slowly, I began to feel like I had a life again. After one talk, a young woman came to me. She had a small bag and a notebook. "I'm a writer," she said. "I want to help you write your story, not just for talks, for the world." I said, "Why me?" She smiled and said, "Because the world needs truth, and your story can help others." We met many times, in cafes, in parks, in the library. She asked questions and wrote my answers. Page by page, we built the book. I read each line. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I asked her to stop. But we kept going. We called it The Girl Who Was Blamed. A small publisher read the draft and said, "This must be printed." I held the first copy of the book in my hands. My name was on the cover. I didn't know what to say. I had no words. Just tears. I had lost everything once. And now I was holding something I made. The book was printed slowly. First, just a few hundred copies. Then more. People read it. They passed it to others. I got letters, messages. One woman wrote, "My brother is in prison. Your story helped him believe again. A man wrote, I read your book. It changed how I see people. I was invited to more places, bigger rooms, more people. Some events had cameras and lights, but I stayed the same. I just told the truth. Every time I said, I didn't do it, but I survived. And I'm still walking. One day, a group of people came to me after a talk. They said, we want to start a program to help those who were wrongly blamed. Can you help? I said yes. We started with small things, letters, visits, talks. Then we built a small center, a safe place, a place for people to write, speak, and heal. The center grew. I helped others tell their stories. I listened to people who felt forgotten. I told them, you matter. You are not alone. And they believed me. Years passed. I still had the same old notebook, the one I wrote in during prison. I kept it safe. It reminded me of who I was. It reminded me of how far I had come. One afternoon, I returned to the bakery. The same woman was still there. I said, you gave me bread when I had nothing. She looked at me and smiled. I remember, she said. I handed her money. This is for that day. She shook her head. No, she said. Just keep helping others. That night, I sat on my bed and opened my notebook. I wrote one last line. They blamed me for something I didn't do, but I found a way to live again. We all go through hard times, but stories like this can help us feel seen. Thank you for watching and come back for more real moments.